Earlier this year, I got my first ever artist grade watercolor that I have been wanting for so long. I started my watercolor journey since 2016, and since then I've always wanted to have my very own artist grade watercolor, and finally I got it. And the one I chose is the NIGHTS Watercolor. And now that I think of it, I actually remember someone from TikTok way back 2020 telling me to try out NIGHTS Watercolor and Winsor & Newton one, because I have been mentioning back then that I have been looking for an artist grade watercolor, and I'm gonna try to look for that comment if I can. But yeah, since then I actually started searching for which among the two is better, and I found out that the NIGHTS Watercolor performs a little bit better than the Winsor & Newton, but in the end it depends on your preferences. And if you don't already know, NIGHTS Watercolors actually comes in two different types. There's one that comes in a plastic case and one that comes in a metal case, one which is like the one I got. You might think that the only difference between the two of them is the case, but actually there's more. The colors that come in the metal case one all contains a 3-star rating in light fastness. On the other hand, the one that comes in the plastic set one, not all colors contains a 3-star rating in light fastness, so you might want to consider that when you're planning on purchasing this specific brand of watercolor. The metal case one is actually a newer version, that's why they upgraded the colors, and it's a little bit more expensive by 300 to 400 Philippine peso. Also, if you're new to arts and you haven't heard of the term light fastness, it is the ability of a dye or pigment to endure light and retain its original color over time. Basically, the higher the rating, the more resistant the color is to fading when exposed to sunlight. So if you're a watercolor artist or you use other coloring materials and you've noticed your colored artworks fade over time, that probably means that your coloring materials have a low rating in light fastness. Honestly, if you're a beginner and or you only want to paint or make art for yourself, then light fastness shouldn't really be a problem for you. However, if you'd want to do commissions or if you want to sell your artworks to other people, then you definitely should invest in coloring materials with a high star rating in light fastness. After a quick snack break, it's finally time to do the swatches and try it out. So as I was swatching all the colors, the very first thing I noticed was how pigmented all the colors are. Even just by getting a small amount of paint on my brush, I could paint a somewhat large area. The colors were so nice and blended very nicely with the water. However, I do have a problem with the yellow ochre one. I noticed how streaky it was and not as pigmented as the other paints, as you can see in this next clip. And so, as you can see, I really had a hard time working with the yellow ochre as it didn't seem to blend well with the water. And I don't know if this is the same with everyone who has this brand of watercolor, but I do remember seeing Ham Rib's video about this, and she had the same problem with the yellow ochre. Also, if you're wondering or if you're worried why there is no white in this palette, it is not only this palette, because if you look up other brands of artist grade watercolor or expensive watercolors, you'd notice that there is literally no white in the palette. That is because watercolor is not the same with other types of paint such as acrylic or oil, because with watercolor, instead of using white paint to lighten a color, we just use water. As you can see in my swatches, there is a lighter area and a darker area. That is because on the lighter area, I used more water, or I added more water in the paint. I actually forgot to film the last part of swatching the other two colors that I bought. And also, I forgot to film the part where it was all dried. So this clip right here was actually filmed just this month of July, after I exposed it to sunlight for a few months. And I know that you can't really tell the difference since I wasn't able to film the last part, but I definitely noticed that the colors or the pigments are still as vibrant as it was a few months ago.